Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Stallings. The next item is the payment of state special education money owed after school closure. I don't have my note. Who's going to take that one on give a background?
Jared Scott.
Okay, Scott, that's figured you because there's a lot of numbers. So,
right, sir. Yeah, just as background, this is a process by which there was a school closure. As part of that, or before the school closure, there was identified amounts owing for special education funds, both for federal and state. The amount owed to the federal government has long been satisfied. Then we embarked on a process of really, just allowing any and all opportunities to meet the amount that was owed for the state special education funds to go back into the Uniform School Fund. We've exhausted all of those options, and I just want to applaud or commend everyone that was part of the process. State Charter School Board, authorizer staff, give credit even to the school and some of the remaining staff members themselves, individuals that took over for a while. So in the end of it all, we're down to a balance of 53,000. Let's see, I have them down in front of me. Yes. Hang on just one second.
53,102 and 12 cents.
okay.
Yeah, $53,102.12. So with that, my further understanding is that there was an agreement, which is in draft form right now for consideration. So, Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Brian so he can detail that agreement, and we can look to, finalize or settle the amount owed that would go back into the Uniform School Fund.
Okay. AAG Brian Quisenberry.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is Brian Quessenberry, and as Scott indicated, there is a proposed agreement between the State Charter School Board and this board. State Charter School Board has proposed it, and essentially the upshot of the proposed agreement is that the State Charter School Board will agree with no further kind of objection or dispute to pay the remaining $53,102 from their account. In exchange, they've asked for, and this is kind of the key piece, that they no longer be held accountable as an authorizer for any future kind of shortfall or any other AISU 2.0, so to speak. That's the gist of it. There's one piece I've been asked about a couple of times, and that is the statute that is referenced in the first recital on the first page. And it is 53G-5-303. And there's a subsection 3G and then 3 little I. And let me just read it real quickly. It states that, and I have it right here in front of me, neither the authorizer nor the state, so it'd be State Charter School Board, nor the state is liable for the debts or financial obligations of the charter school or a person who operates the charter school. Now, the context of this provision is it is an assurance contained in the charter agreement between the authorizer and the charter school. And so USBE is not a party to that charter agreement. Nonetheless, the legislature obviously felt it important to include this provision, statutory provision, that is contained in, again, the agreement between the authorizer and the charter school to, I guess, protect authorizers. And so that's kind of a key legal aspect here of this proposed agreement. Like I said, I've been asked about it, kind of what it means. The rest of the proposed agreement is fairly straightforward. It contains kind of a history of what happened with AISU and USBE. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Board Member Hanson.
Thanks. And my question was about that section in the statute, Brian. I wondered, so it talks there about debts and financial obligations. In context, is a reimbursement of funds, does that qualify as a debt or financial obligation?
When you
all the other federal regulations that talk about our responsibilities and the charter school board's responsibilities for funds that are dispersed.
tell me where you're reading the reference there to debts and financial obligations. Oh, there it is. It's in the 3 little I that I've read. Is liable for the debts or financial obligations. So you're asking if a reimbursement is included in that as a debt or a financial obligation?
Yeah. Because I think typically a debt or financial obligation is something that maybe outside of the reimbursement category, I guess, something that they would incur as far as a lease or obligations they have to suppliers or something like that. But I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah. I don't know if Scott has had any experience here in that.
Yeah, the Charter School Credit Enhancement Program is part of the UCSFA or the bond. So I'm not sure. I mean, if you're pulling that up, that's more pertinent to the bonding process, I believe. You know, except it's provided in Part 6 Charter School Credit Enhancement Program. The Charter School Credit Enhancement Program is through the UCSFA, the conduit. So I'm not sure if we're trying to apply that to what's happening here.
Ultimately, Board Member Hanson, that issue has not been resolved. There's no case law that helps us or any kind of gives us any kind of guidance. So I guess your guess on that is as good as mine. I think you can argue that would be a debt, but maybe you can argue it's not a debt. So that's a good question.
My question is just what Deputy Superintendent Jones brought up. Is this code section applicable to the kind of funds that we're dealing with? Because I thought it looked like it was a little bit out of context. And if we sign this, do we set a precedent that says that this is going to be applicable to any funds that go to charter schools?
Yes. On your last question, this would be a precedent.
Yeah, so I agree with Brian. It would be a precedent, and you know, what we're seeking here is basically a reimbursement to the Uniform School Fund, because as a simple explanation of this, the money that flowed through to that particular LEA was not used in the fashion or the intended way it was appropriated to us by the legislature. So we can't write it off, and we explain this. The attorney for the State Charter School Board, David Jones, met with State Finance. They explained it to him. It just is what it is. This, in order for the state to properly balance the books, so to speak, is this money needs to be reimbursed into the Uniform School Fund. So my concern is that if we say, well, no one would be held liable, or, so if money is not used for this intended purpose, state money, or it's determined that it was used unallowably or, in violation of the code that restricts it for a particular purpose, we'll run into the same situation where we don't balance properly because the money didn't get to the end of the row, so to speak. It wasn't used for its intended purpose as determined by a fiscal monitor or an auditor. And so that's all we're doing is we're accounting, literally we are accounting for every public education dollar and that it was used appropriately. I mean, if we can take anything away from this, it's just that. It's just that, year after year, we account for every penny of education funding and that it was used in the intended or for the intended purpose by way of the appropriation language. So, that would be my concern, is that we'd be sending a message that, if no one out there is held any way, shape, or form for how the money is spent or that it was allowable, it could have, and I get it, it would be unintended, but it could have second or third level effects. I hope that explanation helps. And then just, if I may, real quick, Chair Huntsman, I see now, that the language is except as provided in Part 6. Neither this, including Davis, is liable. Okay, so I apologize for bringing the charter school credit enhancement there, but, I really feel, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that state finance did explain to the state charter school board attorney that it's not a debt or an obligation. It's a reimbursement to the state because they the money didn't get to or get used in the proper or allowable way as determined by the audit. So, I know it may be cited as mincing words, but that was the explanation that was given, and I thought very well, by the state finance representative, that, if it were a debt, like a promissory note, that's where you can get into the realm of writing a debt off. But because it's not a debt, it's a request for reimbursement. So if you go to the code that allows the board or, the superintendent, it does use the word reimbursement. It doesn't say debt. So, or obligation, right? What we were seeking was a reimbursement for that money, and somebody has to provide the reimbursement. Otherwise, the money or the dollar, that public education dollar, didn't meet it to the end of the row.
If I may, Chair, just for that reason, I think we're in very dangerous territory if we expand the definition of debt and financial obligation, which I can't see in this section of the code. It doesn't look like it's defined. There is a definition of assets, but there isn't anything on debts or financial obligations. But by signing this, I think that we de facto say that these reimbursements are debts and financial obligations, and I don't think that's a good place to be. I think that will severely limit us in the future.
Sorry, Board Member Davis.
Thank you. I would just like to read the end from David Jones, their AAG. I'd just like to read the end of what he wrote in his statement. The last point about working collaboratively to find solutions is an integral part of this agreement. Other states have funding for situations where a charter school has not appropriately accounted for use of special ed funds. Whether you call it, a reimbursement or whatever. Existing state budgets shouldn't be used to fill in the difference. Neither the authorizers nor the state nor any agency of the state should be required to pay the financial obligations of a charter school. However, there's nothing after that that says then who does. When we have, we have to reimburse the federal government or we have to reimburse taxpayers of the state. So my question is, if he is saying that other states have funding situations, what are those? And is this something perhaps one of our committees, I don't know, finance or something, could look at financially? How are other states doing exactly what he said? How are they funding for situations where a charter school has not appropriately accounted for use of special ed funds? And what are the repercussions of that? I know when we discussed that earlier, it was a little bit argued against having a line item from the legislature by legislators, and some on the charter board were a little worried there would be that could be a scapegoat. But is there a way to work collaboratively and think outside the box and come up with some solutions? And maybe that could be something that we pursue. I think we need to pursue it because we're getting more authorizers. Utah State University has just come on as an authorizer. Snow College wants to come on as an authorizer. And this is really something that we need to explore and get figured out.
So there is an expectation from the state charter board that what you were talking about, more dialogue and more communication on what right looks like on this issue is still on the table. There was talk last legislative session. Okay, how do we do what? Let's see where this goes. And of course, the water didn't get pushed to the end of the road. So there's the opportunity for discussion is always there. The state charter school board is put this out before us. Well, before I don't want to take all the time here. But I do have something to add. But let's go to Board Member Lear. Her hand was up before mine.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and a comment. First of all, I will not, as a board member, vote for this agreement if there is not, like, if you can't put language in here, if we don't put language in here that says we will do this for the purposes of resolving this issue with AASU, but this is not setting any precedent. We do not acknowledge that this sets a precedent for further satisfaction of, and we can name a laundry list of kinds of things. So first of all, I feel very strongly about that. And I think we could put language in this agreement that states that. I secondly agree with Cindy that maybe this, if we can't put, or if the board doesn't agree, we should be protected with language like that. Then I think I would propose delaying this until we get a definitive answer from the state's attorney, the Attorney General's office, and no offense intended, Brian, but not Brian, not Michelle, not David Jones, but Sean Reyes, who has the authority to provide an Attorney General's opinion saying who is responsible. Because I'm not going to say anyone is not until I know the state board is also not. And I could argue, in fact, in that statute that the state board is the state, using air quotes.
Board Member Lear, do you want to make that a motion?
Yes, there's several pieces to it. Let me think how I'd make it a motion. My point is, I don't know if we should delay it or if we should just make clear, settle with the state charter board, but make clear this is not, we don't accept this condition, or we accept this condition only if it says this. So we have this opportunity before us. We can do something or we do nothing. Right now, there is $53,102.12. I guess I would use the word encumbered on a particular budget item on the state that says state charter school board's budget. And that number started out at 425 and it's whittled down to 53,102. Right.
It's not going to be spent. And so to do nothing, they don't have 53,000, they want to get closure on this, but it's not going to stop their operations or
but I don't want to, and I know they want, and sorry, Chair, I know they want closure, but I'm not going to give them closure at the expense of taking on debts for other charter schools in an ongoing way. And I know
liability you're talking about.
Right. Liability, debts, reimbursements, whatever you want to call them. That's why I'm calling them debts. But I don't know exactly what motion to make. Maybe right now I can't.
Would it be safe
of this as written unless we could have clarifying?
Would it be safe to make a motion to have our AAGs take this situation to Attorney General Reyes and
to an Attorney General's opinion is what I think we need. And
an opinion.
Sorry, Scott, I know you would like closure, but I feel like we probably are safest to not do anything about this until we have a definitive Attorney General's opinion. So I guess my motion would be that we don't accept this agreement.
Well, the motion would be to, if we don't do anything, we don't accept it. So there'd be
Okay,
lack of
that's
a
great.
motion.
Yes, I would then say that. That works too.
Okay.
I kind of like a more definitive statement that we're not just, we did read it, but we have some definite problems with it.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I was just curious if Scott Jones could speak to any concerns that we might have with timing. So I believe that, was there a requirement to settle this particular account by a certain time?
No, ma'am, or Chair Huntsman, to Vice Chair Cummins' question, we've really gone past. I mean, it is still out there in the sense that, the decision was to ensure that, what was determined by a third party audit fiscal monitor as, use of state funds in an unallowable way was reimbursed back to the state. But as far as I know, there wasn't any kind of time. So we've closed, even since then. And, we're just, again, it's not a debt or an obligation. It's a request for reimbursement. It's out there and it's in the public eye that, a particular amount of funds was used unallowably as determined by the fiscal monitors at the time. So, it's just that this, intent to get the money put back into the Uniform School Fund for redistribution, so that we have accounted for every dollar and that every dollar is used for its intended purpose. So short answer is no, I'm not aware of any definitive timeline that says you absolutely had to have, got this back in there. It's out there, though, that the determination was made that funds were used unallowably and that we were to pursue getting those, both the federal and the state funds, recovered and put back into the Uniform School Fund so that they could be redistributed for their intended purpose. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up? Vice Chair Cummins?
No, thank you.
Okay, Board Member Davis?
I just wanted to bring back up again, I think that they had requested an opportunity to sit down and work collaboratively on some solutions and look at maybe what other states are doing and see if there are some things long-term that we could do here in our state. And however this comes out today, I mean, if someone moves that we, that this money pays, but I don't know, whatever, but it doesn't absolve them of other situations in the future, then at least I think we need to add in that we are willing to engage in a process, a collaborative process, to try to find solutions that could be amenable to parties that perhaps other states are implementing.
Well, I don't have an answer to that, but a lack of action, I'm going to go back to that space. If nobody makes a motion, then we're not acting on this. The dialogue is certainly relevant that we've had. A pursuit to resolve this in the future is Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones talked about, and other board members that you brought out, Cindy, what are other states doing is certainly should be part of the dialogue with the state charter board moving forward. So this is the proposal that they've submitted. If somebody's not going to make a motion to accept, then this proposed agreement won't be entertained. Board Member Hanson.
Chair, I'll make a motion that we table this issue and direct staff to investigate further into the binding effect of reimbursement versus financial obligation or debt, and come back to us with more information.
Is there a second?
Second, but I have a clarifying question.
Okay. We have a second. Want to speak to your motion, Scott Hanson, Board Member Hanson?
I'd like to hear the question first, if I may.
Okay. Board Member Davis?
I guess the question is, if we table this topic, then what still is in place is the original $400,000 that this board voted that the state charter school board would come from that state charter school board account. So I guess I just want to clarify what tabling the topic actually looks like.
Okay.
Does that mean that
So
the
let me,
still out of the account?
so that the $425,000 is no longer encumbered. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, do you want to speak to that, please?
Right. So Chair Huntsman's right. The previous action, if you go to the memo for it, the last action the board took was to reduce that encumbrance down to $125,000. Then once that, and then after that was done, more like, oh my gosh, the management company came through with another $25,000, and we sold more buses. So I think I do see Board Member Davis's point, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. But the last action the board took was to reduce the amount that we had fenced. We never pulled money out of the state charter school board budget. We did set aside, so to speak, that amount of money, and then later on, per the last action, if I'm tracking correctly, maybe Lorraine can correct me, that the board took was to reduce the amount that was fenced to $125,000. Then following that, as I tried to articulate in the beginning, we've now gone down to where there's, of the amount that was determined as unallowable of state special education funds is down to 53,102.12. So, perhaps if I'm understanding Board Member Davis, the board would make a recommendation to, set aside, 53,102.12 of that budget, right? Until such a time as, we get more, or staff do what I think was to Board Member Hanson.
So would it be better to say to reduce that number down to, because I think I made that motion that took it to the one, my motion was back then was to reduce the amount to 100 and something. So a motion here would be to reduce that to 53,102.12.
I'll be happy, Chair, to amend my motion to move that we reduce the encumbered amount to the 53,000 and change that we currently see as owing, and table the review of the agreement until we have more information from staff, particularly on the clause that relates to 53G 5-3033G3.
Would it be safe to assume that your motion would be to reduce the encumbered amount to $53,102.12 and table this item and have staff come back to address all items that the resolve questions that board members have brought forth in this discussion, or something like that, which is include 53G and a few other things that people were asking questions on.
That would be acceptable. If Board Member Davis will continue to second it, we can move forward with that.
I will, with some clarification. Is there a difference procedurally between tabling and postponing the decision? And is part of the motion that that we will research what some other states are doing and see if we can work toward coming up to some solution options in this arena.
Lorraine, the difference between table and postpone, because
Yeah, that's just a kind of an incorrect statement. It would be to lay on the table, but that only occurs within the same meeting. You would have to take it up or it just goes away. So the better thing would be to postpone to a future meeting.
So moved then. We'll postpone and include the analysis that Board Member Davis is requesting in the homework that staff will complete.
okay, so let me try to state this motion without objection, is that we reduce the encumbered amount down to $53,102.12. Postpone this discussion and have staff bring back information as mentioned by staff during, or as requested by board members during this discussion. Would that fly? Without objection? You're good, Scott?
Yes. So
You're
moved.
good, Cindy? Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. And I don't want to repeat it. Like for the third time. So please vote at this time. The voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Scott. Okay, board members, at this time, we'll